Hey guys, this is Krista from the Moratorium. Do you like grisly gore and mysteries? Of course you do. That is why I suggest you subscribe to my blog, Suspended Animation, Dormant Stories Waiting to be Told, where we at the Moratorium offer a number of lurid tales from axemen running around New Orleans to phantoms in Texarkana. And if you're feeling especially generous, head over to our Patreon, where for just a couple bucks a month, you can help the Moratorium grow. And that would be pretty kick-ass. And remember, long live VHS.
Ooh, witchy woman, see how high she flies. Ooh, witchy woman, she got the moon in her eye. Welcome to the Moratorium. I'm Tim Cornman, and this week I'm joined once again by my good friend Krista Funk to bring you a true crime crossover with the Salem Witch Trials. Join us as we delve into the darkness of American history. Cue the music. And in 3, 2, 1, I already forgot it.
You will be soon as big as a giant, or like all the others, dead.
You think I imagined all of it, don't you? You think I'm insane?
That's feng shui.
A match made in a bathroom, just floating into the void.
Hey, Krista,
Hey, Tim.
you want to hear a corny joke?
Of course.
April showers bring May flowers. What do May flowers bring?
I don't know. What did Mayflowers bring?
Pilgrims.
Pilgrims. Mayflower. Mayflower.
Third grade for everybody. Actually, I wrote that joke on a recipe book that I made like in second grade for my mom. I've still got it somewhere in here.
Clever.
It's a horrible joke.
Clever.
But it's relevant because this is our Thanksgiving episode.
Ah.
Yeah.
Yep. Except we're actually going to be in the Massachusetts Bay Colony, not the Plymouth Colony.
Yeah, it's close.
I think the first question you should probably ask is, what is a Puritan?
I'm a Puritan at heart.
You are?
I am so pure. I don't suppose Puritan meant because they were actually pure at heart.
They believed that they were going to purify the Church of England specifically.
Ooh.
Thus the name.
Purify
Puritan.
it of what?
Well, they thought it was corrupt, you know.
Okay.
They didn't think that it was Protestant enough.
Oh.
Yeah, Henry VIII, I mean, he placed himself as head of the church, and there were a couple different kinds of Puritans. There were the Pilgrims. There were one, and then you have your Massachusetts Bay Puritans. But the Pilgrims, they separated from the Church of England entirely.
Okay.
They both shared the same view that they didn't think the English Reformation was Protestant enough. They thought it was still entirely too Catholic.
Okay.
And I don't mean anything offensive here. This is just how they felt.
This is
And
history.
And it's unkind. The Pilgrims were separatist. They separated from the Church of England entirely. They cut all ties. Whereas the Puritans, the Massachusetts Bay Puritans, were technically just a branch thereof the Church of England. They didn't cut all ties. They didn't completely separate from the church.
But the Pilgrims came over here first?
They did. In 1620, they left. They came over here on the Mayflower. And they were pretty much on their own. And truly, they were seeking freedom from religious persecution. They were, heavily persecuted in England. They weren't liked by anybody, really. And the Massachusetts Bay Puritans, they were persecuted as well, but they didn't necessarily cut ties with the Church of England. Therefore, they still recognized to some degree that the king was the head of the church. That's what Henry VIII did when he started the Reformation in England. He placed himself as the head of the church.
And you can just do that if you're the king.
I mean, if you're the king, you can
just... By the way.
You can just say, I'm the head of the church, and I'm going to get rid of my wife. I'm going to bone this lady over here. And, I mean, everyone's going to be cool with it. All right? You guys aren't cool with it. Why? What's going on here? And that is a whole different story. But that created quite a bit of religious turmoil whenever the English Reformation began. Indeed, when the Protestant Reformation began in general. But the Puritans, they were a splinter group from the Church of England. The Pilgrims had separated from the Church of England altogether.
Okay.
Whereas the Massachusetts Bay, they were given a charter that was granted to them by King Charles I, and this was in 1629. So this is 9 years after the Mayflower.
Okay.
And so that's when the Puritans started, as we know them, the Massachusetts Bay Puritans started coming over here.
And why are we talking about the Puritans today?
Because we are going to discuss the Salem Witch Trials. And it involves the Puritans. And so we have to discuss the Puritans.
They were problem children, weren't they?
There was a time when I would be like, yes, these people were crazy. And maybe to a degree, they were, because maybe they didn't know any better, or, it was the time period they lived in, or were they arrogant, narcissistic? Yes, absolutely. Were they absurd? Yes.
How long after the Pilgrims did the Puritans get here? The Massachusetts Bay Puritans?
The Pilgrims came over in 1620, and it was in 1629 when the Massachusetts Bay Colony was given their charter.
Okay, so not too far after.
And this charter, what it did is it gave them the ability to govern themselves in the king's stead.
Okay.
They are still British citizens.
Okay.
They are still subjects of the king, of the monarchy in England. It's just that they live in North America now. They're moving over there. And so they're still subjects of the crown. This charter gives them the ability to set up their own government and govern themselves in the monarchy's stead.
Okay. Were there just boats going back and forth from England to Massachusetts, like, constantly?
There was a mass migration, especially there in the 1640s. One of the reasons for that was not necessarily because there was just shitloads of Puritans and they were all gunning for, the New World or whatever, but, like, for North America. But first of all, what the Puritans, the Massachusetts Bay Puritans, were trying to do, their goal was to set up what they called a city on the hill.
Okay.
Yes, they were persecuted in England, but their main purpose for moving over here was they thought they were going to set up this perfect Christian society that was going to be so great, so perfect, and so successful that everybody else, namely the Church of England, would want to adopt it. And in order to set that up, in order to go over there and essentially build a society out of nothing, you're going to need lots of help. You're going to need people. One of the things that they did was they hired indentured servants. And once they started doing that, then you had a bunch of people coming over.
Gotcha.
One thing that England was full of was people. One thing it did not have enough of was land. And that land is highly coveted. And even though the Puritans knew that there were indigenous tribes over in North America, still, I think in their mind, it was like, hey, there's a bunch of free land over there. I think people in general in England were like, there's a bunch of land over there and it's just up for grabs. That's one of the things that I think made colonial life difficult was you have all of these people coming over there, and not all of them are coming over there necessarily with the same purpose.
Okay.
Some of them are coming over there because they're Puritan and they want to be with the Puritans and they want to take part in this society, and this is where they're all moving to anyway, and they believe in this utopian Christian society that they're going to create. And then this guy over here is like, I just want some land. Because that's what happened when you were an indentured servant. You would go over to North America. Someone would pay your way. They would pay your expenses. They would pay your living expenses for 7 years. They would feed and house you for that period of time. And then when that period of time was over, they would give you your own piece of land. Of course, you work the land that whole time. Mm-hmm. And when that was over, you'd be allotted your own little piece of land. But of course, they always gave them the shittiest parts. But they didn't know that going over there,
You can have the swamp.
Right. You get the marshland over there. Good luck with that.
Yes.
This is, of course, before they really got involved in the slave trade. They hired indentured servants, and these people came from England. They might be poor people that are, just looking for another way in life, to start a new life or something like that. Or they might be a second and third son from a noble or a blue collar family. In that case, their older brother inherited everything. He got all the property, all the money, all the titles. And the second and third son is like, well, I can join the military, or maybe I could go over to this colony and work for these people for 7 years and get my own land.
What was life like for them? The people in general, not the indentured servants, but...
Colonial life in general?
Yes.
Very difficult. Rather you lived in the Virginia colony or the Massachusetts Bay colony, especially the Virginia colony, life was really difficult. There were all sorts of diseases, illnesses creeping up in the Chesapeake that they were not immune to. And of course, this caused a lot of problems, and there were problems with the indigenous. Mm-hmm. Jamestown, of course, they had a very, very rocky beginning. Your life expectancy in the Virginia colony was really low. It was something like, 35 or something crazy like that. Like if you lived past that, you were doing great.
Is that why they got married when they're like 12 and 14?
It was really bad. So you might, on that note, take your chances with the Puritans. Mm. You'll notice something that's really interesting is that you're not going to really find, if any, witch hunts in the Virginia colony. It's not because those people weren't Puritans. The whole belief in witches was something that, it was not something the Puritans came up with. That wasn't an original idea. And that was something that came over here with them. That was a thing well before the Puritans came along. Everybody believed in witches.
So over in England, was there a lot of witch hunts going on around this time?
Around this time? I don't know, but...
Okay.
I can tell you that in Virginia, they didn't really have any issues. It's not due to a disbelief in witches or, a lack in, religion or anything like that. But they simply just did not have time to worry about that stuff.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
They did not have time to worry about witches. They just didn't. They might welcome a witch, like, hey, can you, do something about this water? Because, hey, can you do something about my crops? Because before tobacco was, discovered, Virginia was, really hanging on. So you might, on that note, like I said, take your chances with the Puritans. However, the fact that there were witch hunts that took place in New England, that is a testament to just how well they were actually doing, because they did have time to worry about that. And they did devote lots of time and energy to that.
Maybe too much.
A little too much, but they had the ability to not only, worry about their, general survival, but worry about imaginary things as well. You had your pick, but coming over to the colonies was certainly scary because you really had no idea if you could survive. You just really didn't know. This place was completely foreign to people in England. Then you have the indigenous, which there was all sorts of stories about the indigenous, and the Puritans were certainly terrified of them. The Pilgrims made friends with them. Not all of the tribes were friendly. Some of them were hostile. Mm-hmm. Indian raids were certainly a thing. Living on the frontier was really scary for that reason. If you were going to get attacked, everybody on the frontier was the people who were going to get attacked first.
Yes.
And that's how everyone else would know that there was a problem. So you knew that this was a way of life there. Chances of you. So
they knew this before they came over, but yet they still came over because it was a better chance than what they had. Okay.
Well, living closer, the Massachusetts Bay Colony grew to be big. It encompassed the state of Massachusetts, of course, but also the state of Maine, New Hampshire, and Connecticut.
Wow.
So I know that those states individually aren't very big, but together, this was a very large colony. There's safety in numbers, the more people there are. But like I said, for all those that live on the frontier, that live further out, life was a little more dangerous. Particularly, there were raids that happened in Maine quite a bit. Abigail Williams, she plays a role in the witch trials. We're going to talk about her. The whole reason she was in Salem to begin with was because her parents were killed in an Indian raid in Maine, and she was sent to live with her next of kin, which was her uncle, Samuel Parris.
Okay.
So yeah, you didn't know if you were going to be able to grow your crops. You didn't know if you were going to be successful. You didn't know if you were going to be able to survive at all. You didn't know if you could trust the water. You could not. While the Puritans weren't partiers, they allowed taverns and alcohol because it was safer to drink that than it was to drink the water.
That's right. So let's just get snookered and stay that way.
You had to wake up really early. Your day started very early, and you farmed. You worked all day long. You know, the men worked, and the women, they raised the children. They took care of the house. They cooked the food. They also farmed. I mean, life was difficult in the colonies. They were far more pampered in England than they were back home. I mean, unless you were just really poor. These people weren't necessarily poor. The Puritans had money. They weren't flashy about it. You can tell by their clothing. You know, they were not flashy with their money. They didn't wear flashy, expensive clothing. They wore kind of like dark.
There was not a Gucci bodice out there, was there?
Yeah, they didn't. The women did not wear, you know, they didn't have evening gowns. They didn't wear revealing clothing. That just was not something that they did. But they had money, and they were interested in making money. They were interested in farming and being successful and making money and being prosperous.
Were they trading amongst themselves of different colonies, or was this stuff that they were trading with back in England?
England. Yeah.
Okay.
You did your business with England. And Massachusetts made money off of an assortment of different things. You know, the wood that was there. The codfish was another. There were several things that the colony produced that they made money on.
What was their education like? I mean, did they have schools for their kids and trying to raise them right? Or were they basically having kids to therefore have people to work the land?
First of all, if you were a peasant, chances are you didn't have time for school. You worked. That's what you did. So everybody could survive. If you did have any kind of schooling, it would be a parent, a family member, somebody that teach you to read, you know, teach you to write. Illiteracy was a problem for a while, especially among the peasant class, because they just didn't have time to learn any of that stuff, or there just wasn't anyone to teach them.
Right.
Or maybe their parents were illiterate themselves. But the richer classes, you know, the nobles especially, you know, they could hire tutors, educators, governesses, things like that. The Puritans, their education system was mainly focused on the church entirely.
That's what I was wondering, yes.
They had no separation of church and state whatsoever. Salem, the Massachusetts Bay Colony as a whole, was a theocracy. So for them, their education was solely centered around Christianity and the church. As far as like learning to read and write and things like that, you know, you taught your children, you hired someone, you know, something like that. It was not unusual for households to hire somebody to help out around the house for, you know, whether it's with the children or cooking or cleaning or something like that. But as far as like the church is concerned, absolutely, the Puritan society their education was all about the church. It was centered all around that.
How do you know so much about this?
Well, nerdism. I've been interested in it in a really long time. I guess it really started with curiosity. You say witch hunt, witch trials, Salem, you know, these things spark an interest in people because, you know, witches are scary. Something scary happened in Salem, you know? But of course, when you dive more into that story, you start finding, yes, this was indeed a scary story, but not because of witches, not because of anything supernatural.
And we're not talking about necessarily witches that are flying on brooms and casting spells among other. What was their idea of a witch?
It comes from Exodus. There's a line in Exodus in the Old Testament that says, "Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live." And one of the things that definitely came about with the Protestant Reformation was Scripture. It's your authority. If what is in Scripture is, you cannot change that. You can't deviate from it. You have to, what it says is this is set in stone. This is God's law. We have to obey it. Whether you disagree with it or not, and thou shalt not suffer a witch to live. Therefore, that's how we know witches exist, because there it is in Scripture.
Gotcha.
You know?
And taking the Bible literally has never been used against any
Ever.
faction of people ever, right?
Ever. Never. What are you talking about? That's unheard of. What are you talking about? Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live. Yeah, it's that line had a very profound effect on religion, on the Christianity especially, and sent quite a few people, that would be a modest way of putting it, thousands and thousands of people to their deaths. Witch hunts were a thing. They were sporadic. I mean, we kind of often tend to think that they happened all the time, and they did happen, but they were kind of sporadic. But each and every one was absurd. All of these people who died for false charges. And we know this because we know witches, in this sense, they don't exist. And with the Age of Enlightenment has happened. And we know that, witches and vampires and werewolves and things like that are not actually real. But there was a time when people were
How dare you?
But there was a time when people were persecuted over the belief that they were such things, namely witches. And a lot of these people were women. And there's a reason for that.
All women are witches, that's why.
Well, yeah, all women are witches. Yeah, like I said, the belief in witches was not something that the Puritans came up with. That was something that was already present, and an idea, a belief that they brought over with them. And part of the reason that the Puritans, and everyone else for that matter, usually went after women with a witchcraft accusation was because of a book that was published in, I believe it was 1486. It was written by two monks. It was called the Malleus Maleficarum.
I'm sorry, the Mouse Club?
The Mouse Club, yep. The Malleus Maleficarum means the hammer of the witch.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's like a French phrase for meaning hammer of the witch. And
okay.
It was written by these two monks who essentially what they did was they wrote this book. It was meant to serve it did serve as a guide for hunting and locating, identifying, and trying witches.
Ooh. Have you read this book?
I have a copy of it. I do,
Ooh.
actually, right here, sitting in front of me.
How many of those qualities mentioned in the book are actually qualities that you have? All women are witches. I'm just asking.
This book, it does have a chapter in it that, ladies, if you read it, it will make, I laughed. I couldn't help but just laugh, but
it's a comedy.
it makes me giggle. Others, it just might make your blood boil. I don't know, one or the other, but you're not going to read it and go, oh man, this is just so insightful. I feel like a better person for having read it. No, it's pretty absurd, the whole thing.
Really?
And very misogynist, because there is a chapter in here on specifically why women specifically are more susceptible to becoming a witch than a man. It doesn't say that men can't turn into witches, because they can, and men were accused and executed for witchcraft, but not on the level that women were. It was a tool, I think, several times used to just get rid of somebody, not that you actually thought that they were a witch. But anyway, this book...
Do you have any examples out of the book?
Well, okay, so it says here, a wicked woman is, by her nature, quicker to waver in her faith, and consequently quicker to turn from the faith, which is the root of witchcraft. Essentially, it goes on and on. Essentially, they're saying that women are more likely to turn from Christianity, to turn from their faith, than a man is, because a woman is weaker spiritually, she's weaker physically. She's weaker emotionally than a man.
I don't suppose this book made it onto Oprah's list.
Yeah, yeah, it's like I said, it's just absurd. The majority of the book focuses on women and their role in witchcraft. Because women were made from a bent rib, there's a story in the Bible. Eve was made from a rib, right? Taken out Adam.
Right.
These authors asserted that, okay, well, this rib was bent in a way contrary to a man, and therefore all women, oh my God, are defective.
Oh.
Like, that's the word they use. They're defective.
They did not get that extended warranty. I've been warning you about that.
Okay, so I want you to understand, like, the hypocrisy here. Like, God is all omnipotent. He knows everything. We can't question him. We just have to obey. We just do what he says. And you're going to tell me that this guy built this woman, but he purposely made her defective? Because of this bent rib thing, because of this, they're not as intelligent as men, okay? It's not their fault that necessarily.
Nope, it's because of the man, actually.
God really kind of screwed up there. I don't know what's going on with him, but I don't know what these monks were thinking when they tried to argue, but they did argue this. Women they're just not as intelligent. They're more gullible. And because of this, they are easily seduced and turned into witches and turned to the devil.
Seduced by the dark side.
Oh, yes, because that's another thing that they put in this book. I'm not even playing. Women were constantly looking for sex.
Ooh.
They're very promiscuous.
Where are these women?
They're very scandalous, very promiscuous, and they want sex all the time.
Sluts.
When they can't get sex all the time, they're gonna go get it somewhere else. And if they have to go into the graveyard and go find a demon, then by golly, that's what they're gonna do. Okay? They wrote in this book that women, they do that. They have sex with demons. That's what witches do. They have sex with demons. Witches. And,
all right.
And yeah, they're seduced by them. And this is how they get turned into witches.
Is this the storyline for The Devil and Mrs. Jones? Right.
And you know what? When Rebecca Nurse, we'll talk about her later on, but when she got accused of witchcraft, I think if I were in the crowd, I'd be like, wait a minute, this old lady, she's like in her 70s. You're telling me she's out there having sex with demons? Like, right on, lady.
Grandma likes the forked tongue.
Like, wow, okay, I mean, the youngest person accused was a 4-year-old, but okay, I mean, they're all having...
God.
Bitches love demons, okay, Tim? They love demons. But if you can't intimidate them through sex, if you can't seduce them, if that doesn't work, which it probably will, because all these women...
Yeah. Oh, they're horny.
They are...
they are hot for teacher.
If you can't get them through sex, then you just scare the shit out of them. You got to intimidate them. You got to threaten them. And that will certainly work, because you can easily intimidate them because they're weaker,
Oh, yeah.
And because they're weaker, you can scare them easily. And that way, that's how they get them.
Okay.
They said that women had terrible memories.
What was that? Who are
women,
you? What are we doing?
You can educate them if you like, but they're going to forget it. So, it's kind of a waste. But they're just going to fucking forget that
right.
They,
I don't remember having sex with that demon. I don't remember being a witch, but okay, if you say so.
Women could not be priests.
Okay.
Even outside of a Puritan society, women could not be ministers and priests. But it was true in a Puritan society. They couldn't be ministers. And granted, this book came out before the Puritans, but they asserted that women were just really, really jealous of men because they could do these things. And women weren't allowed to do this because they're unintelligent. They have sex with demons and they have weak memories and all that shit. So obviously they can't be your priest. And they're jealous of men. And because of this, they're vengeful. They're naturally vengeful. And this might also lead them to the devil. They wrote that you couldn't really, for all of these reasons, you just really couldn't trust women. Scandalous,
Okay.
This book talked about how demons love midwives.
Ooh, yeah.
And they loved midwives because midwives delivered babies, and one of the things that, Satan and his demons want to do is, kill people's babies. So they would do this by, infiltrating midwives and turning them to the devil and using them to kill the newborn.
Okay. Well, they probably, because I don't know if you heard, but man, Chili's got some baby back ribs and they are tasty.
Those are tasty baby back ribs.
That's it.
But were they bent in such a way that, like, is it defected? Because those might be some defected baby back ribs. You don't know.
Yeah. Well, can't have always perfect baby back ribs. Unless you go to Chili's. I'm sorry. It's a fact. It's probably in your book.
These midwives would also, sometimes they would steal these babies and sacrifice them to the devils, to demons, and the devil. There was that too.
So now midwives can't be trusted to deliver babies, but who else is going to deliver the babies but oh my God. It's an endless loop.
They did say that, yes, men are fully capable of becoming witches, and they do. But it's really the women that you have to look out for, because they be out there having sex with demons and shit. So, and once a woman becomes a witch, you're going to love this.
Oh.
We're about to turn into 9-year-olds, like, real quick. In 3, 2, 1. Witch's teat.
You suckle from the witch's teat.
Witches were thought to develop witches' teats.
Mm-hmm.
And
superfluous nipples?
And I'm over there like, is it a third nipple? Like, what is it? Yeah, it's a teat. It's a teat. These were, in reality, these were nothing more really than moles, freckles, skin tags, warts.
It's a teat.
Birthmarks. But looking for these witches' teats, and that's what the Malleus would tell you to do. It would tell you have to go look for these. They're not going to be visible because, obviously you're not going to sport it like, hey, look at my witch's teat, what's up,
Mm-hmm, yeah.
You gotta go look for it. And these priests, guess where they said you're likely to find these teats? We'll give you one guess.
I want to get so dirty here.
Do you want to get your hands on a young girl and examine her for the witch's teats? Because that's what they're telling you to do.
No.
They're telling you to go dig around her genitals.
Oh,
so that's probably where it is. So you can imagine how many young girls were taken advantage of like this, Mm-hmm. Ooh, that girl is awfully pretty. Let's accuse her of witchcraft and we can examine her for witch's teats. Yeah, to say that this didn't happen would be ludicrous because it did.
I have to tell you here, in preparation for this coverage on the Salem Witch Trials, I did watch a movie because that's what I do. I bring the movie aspect to everything, and I enjoy these different movies. But I actually watched a 2002 TV movie called The Salem Witch Trials, which has Kirstie Alley, Rebecca De Mornay, and Shirley MacLaine in it. And Shirley MacLaine is at one point accused of being a witch, and she is brought before the court and told to disrobe. They disrobe her and look for a witch's teat, and they find it on her.
Mm-hmm. And it was probably a mole or a freckle or something like that.
It probably was, but that's exactly how they were. It's like, it's a teat. That's a teat. And it was amusing because thinking of Shirley MacLaine, she probably is a witch and she might have a teat.
I love Shirley MacLaine. I do. I love Shirley MacLaine. I love Rebecca De Mornay too.
I will be referring to this movie. I'll be going back and forth to it as we get further down in this series. So please continue. Tell me more about this witch's teat.
The witch's teat. There was another name for it. They could just simply call it the witch's mark.
That's not near as fun.
It's not near as fun as witch's teat. A witch tit. But that's what they called them. It was a witch's teat or a witch's mark. And it was believed that witches developed these after they, of course, became witches so that, because they're having sex with demons, right? They can come and suck from them, I guess, demon juice. They're coming to get some demon juice. I mean, I'm going to tell you right now, the priests that wrote this book were so sexually frustrated, it's unreal.
Well, you said they were monks, and monks are known to be celibate, right?
They were Catholic priests, and therefore they would have become celibate as long as you actually were celibate.
What else does this book cover? What does it tell you how to destroy a witch?
You kill them.
Is it specific on how to kill them? I mean, these are witches. They're supernatural beings, right? How can you kill a witch?
Everybody dealt with witch hunts differently. I think it's kind of a wide misconception that confessing to an accusation of witchcraft would save you. That was not always the case. A lot of people were still executed. It was true in Salem. If you confessed, that was the only way you were going to get out of it alive. Okay. But that wasn't necessarily true in every other case before that. But back in England, witchcraft fell under heresy.
Okay.
It was heretical to be a witch. And it was also treasonous because to be a witch, I mean, from the time the Church of England became a thing, from that point on, it was also treasonous to be accused of witchcraft because, remember, your king is the head of the church.
Right.
And if you are turning to the devil and turning your back on your faith, you are also turning your back on your sovereign. Okay. So, on your king. So, and that was treason. You didn't do that. The punishment for both of these things was to burn at the stake.
Burn her. Burn the witch.
For a long time, people were burned at the stake for heresy. Treason, you might be beheaded.
Off with their head.
But heresy, you would most certainly burn. And the reason they did this is, well, first of all, they thought they were doing you a favor. Really.
Hey, we're only helping you out here.
Because they believed that the flames, the fire, kind of, if you won't recant what you said that was heretical, if you won't save your soul, then, well, they're just going to have to help you out there and burn you and cleanse you.
Okay. So purify your soul in the meantime, and then you can hopefully...
Well, it was up to God whether or not he forgave you, but they were just trying to help you out there.
That guy, he's the one that made the witches in the first place by giving the women a bent rib, right?
I mean, by making them defective. God.
And what's a platypus, right?
So, yeah, they burned heretics at the stake.
So we're talking about over in England.
Yes, but...
when they did their witch hunts.
But contrary to popular belief, nobody was burned at the stake in New England. That was...
Okay.
Or anywhere else in the colonies, for that matter. No one was beheaded either. The preferred method of execution by that point for any crime was hanging. So... Okay.
Boring.
You know... I think one guy in Jamestown got a firing squad.
Ooh.
But everyone else, most people were, there for a while, were hung. England had actually stopped burning people at the stake quite a while before the Puritans migrated over to Massachusetts.
Okay. Were they still actively, though, searching for witches?
I'm sure they probably were, but we didn't burn people at the stake. Okay. They kind of stopped doing that towards the end of Elizabeth's reign or thereafter. It was like 100 years before the Puritans even migrated over to Massachusetts. England had stopped the practice of burning people. You didn't burn them for heresy. You didn't burn them for anything else. That was not, burning people at the stake was not on the table anymore by that point.
Okay.
But you would hang them.
Hey, rope's cheap.
The belief in witches was still very real, even though they might have stopped burning them at the stake. They would still kill you for that. And like I said, witch hunts were sporadic. Just how many there were, we don't actually know. And the reason that is because I had a professor in college that told me that there were churches in Europe, in Spain, that had rooms filled with nothing but cases that were tried by the Spanish Inquisition. And
not the Spanish Inquisition again.
You didn't expect the Spanish Inquisition. And all of these cases were for heresy. So how many of those cases were for witchcraft? We don't know, unless you just went through and sifted through all of them. And they weren't the only Inquisition. There was also the Roman Inquisition.
Not the Roman Inquisition.
And like I said, everybody believed in witches. This was just something, this came over here with the Puritans.
Okay.
You have to understand that they were isolated in that colony for a while. Salem especially was very isolated. As one historian put it, they were just kind of hanging in there. Okay. And they were.
Were they not prospering like?
They were a little seaport, and there was actually some problems in 1692. There was actually some problems between some political turmoil going on in Salem by 1692, because you actually had two different towns called Salem. One was called Salem Town. The other was Salem Village. And honestly, if you go there today, if you want to see all the shops and people who want to read your palm or give your tarot cards or whatever, you can go to Salem Town and do that. It's a cute place. I loved Salem. It was a cute place. But they had an identity crisis at some point, because I swear, everybody there, every shop you go into, there's somebody there that's like, I'm a witch and I can tell your future, or I can do your tarot reading or whatever, you know? And
I have a defective rib.
You know, and I'm over there like, but I thought the idea was they were arguing there were no witches here.
Uh-huh. Now it's full of witches.
If you want to see where the Salem Witch Trials began, you would need to go a few miles down the road, and go to Danvers.
Okay.
The town of Danvers was Salem Village in 1692. And this is where the accusing girls lived. They were from Salem Village. Ann Putnam Jr., the most vocal of all of them, that's where she lived. This is where Samuel Parris lived, and they were actually becoming two separate towns at the time that the witch trials broke out.
Okay.
Salem Village was further away from Salem Town. Those people were farmers. They were kind of spread out, and they're on the frontier, by the way. And we've already talked about why, that was kind of spooky. There's the woods, the wilderness. Next to them, and they are terrified of what's in that. They believed that some of those indigenous tribes were devil worshippers.
Of course.
Yeah.
We're always afraid of what we don't know.
We fear what we don't understand, and they did not understand the indigenous. No, nor did they care to try. Gee, I wonder why the indigenous were, I wonder why these tribes were raiding. I wonder why they did that. So they were already, they've got this belief in witches. They've got this utopian Christian society that they believe Satan is certainly going to try to tear apart and destroy. So, of course, they've got to be diligent and look for, witches that are in their midst.
Yes.
They were scared of what was in those woods. They were scared of the indigenous. Hell, they were probably scared of their own shadow. But they were just kind of hanging on over there in Salem. They were a small seaport community. And like I said, at the time that these trials broke out in 1692, you've got all of everybody in Salem Village being like, listen, I don't want to make the trek. Church was mandatory in a Puritan society. And if you lived really far away from church, the more inconvenient it was for you to get to church.
Right.
But if you had a church maybe closer, well, that might be something. And so essentially what they did was they made their own church in Salem Village, and now they've split from Salem Town, and you've got two congregations, and they are, we just can't have this. You know what I mean? So this was kind of what was going on at the time that the witch trials broke out. And they were, dealing with this political turmoil. The Salem villagers did not want to be under the political thumb of Salem Town anymore.
Okay. So did the actual pilgrims that were separated from the Church of England, did they seem to have the same type of problems with witches? Because it sounds like this is a plague of witches, right?
The first big witch trial, witch hunt, as you would call it, to take place in New England was in Connecticut in the 1640s. Okay. So it wasn't even in Salem. It was in the Massachusetts Bay Colony, but not Salem. And this was in the 1640s. It's like 1647. And this was a a series
Was it
of
just
people.
one? Oh, this was to say, was it just one witch, or were there many witches?
No, there was a series of people.
Okay.
I think there was 11 of them total. Because, it was like from 1647 to like 1658 or something like that, like to the 1650s, and in that time, there was something like 11 people who were accused, tried, and found guilty and hung for witchcraft.
Okay. Do you think this book, was it kind of what brought about the witch hunts, maybe?
I would say it was heavily used.
Yeah.
I think it was used for exactly what it was meant to be. It was meant to be a guide. It's witchcraft for dummies, it's, that's what it is, a reference guide. The first person to be accused of witchcraft in New England was in Connecticut in 1647, and it was a young woman named Elise Young.
Okay.
Other sources just called her Alice.
Okay.
She and another woman, Mary Johnson, were actually both accused, and they were both found guilty and hung for witchcraft. But Mary Johnson was pregnant at the time, and so she actually wasn't hung until 1650 after she was given time to, of course, have her baby.
Well, did they not think that the baby would also possibly be a witch?
It's living off of demon juice inside of her, so,
It's coming out ready to suck on the teeth.
Yeah, she's got the witch's teats, prime ready to go.
Engorged witch's teats, yes.
Well, and the difference between these women is Elise Young denied the accusations against her. She was still found guilty and executed. Mary Johnson was the first person in New England to confess to an accusation of witchcraft.
Okay.
And she was still killed. So like I said, not always...
The truth will not always set you free.
Not always will confessing to a witchcraft accusation get you out of it alive. In Salem, that was true, but overall, I think that's a misconception. However, Samuel Sewell, he was a magistrate in the Massachusetts Bay Colony. He actually served on the court of Orion Terminer that tried everybody in Salem. We'll talk about him later on, but he made a comment that is very true in a Puritan society. There was nothing harder to wipe off than an accusation of witchcraft.
Okay.
Even if you survived your trial, you're accused and you're acquitted, the accusation still followed you everywhere you went. It would still continue to haunt you. You would become kind of an outcast, a pariah.
Okay, yeah.
And moving to another part of the colony may not make a difference. And that's usually what someone would do. They would just move to another area. But the accusation could follow you there. And these ruin people's lives. An accusation of witchcraft would ruin your lives. It would ruin your credibility, your reputation forever.
Was there ever a colony of just witches? They're like, hey, come on over. We're fine.
An island of misfit witches.
Yeah.
But Mary Johnson, she was the first person to try the confession route and see if that would save her.
And they were like, oh, no, if you just confess, things will be better for you. And she's like, okay, I'm a witch. They're like, ha ha, we got you. We knew it. You're going to die.
She still got the noose. And the things that they had her confess to is pretty wild. You'll never guess. She confessed to carnal acts with demons. That's what she was accused of. She was accused of, conjuring the devil, and she confessed to all of this. But when that didn't save her, she was like, but I'm pregnant. And they were like, cool, we'll just wait until your baby's born.
Yeah.
And then they hung her.
What happened to the baby afterwards? Is there any record?
I don't know.
I'm worried about this kid, okay?
But Catherine Harris, she was the third person in New England accused of witchcraft. And what separates her from the first two is she also confessed to the charges against her, which included, I have sex with demons, I conjure the devil, I do all sorts of scary witch shit.
Okay.
But she was actually allowed to live.
Okay.
And
why her?
I'm not real sure why she was allowed to live, but she was. And this made her the first convicted witch in New England to survive a witch trial. Sometimes, and this was true in Salem, confessing was seen as an act of putting yourself back into the hands of God. Okay. And by doing that, at that point, it was up to God whether or not he forgave you or not. But
oh, yes. Hold on. I'm getting a message. Nope, you're going to hang.
So I think maybe the reason Catherine Harris, I'm not sure what separated her from Mary Johnson, but I think one of the reasons that she might have been allowed to live was, that her confession put her back into the hands of God. It was up to God to judge her or to decide whether or not she was beyond forgiveness. And that's one thing that we haven't talked about. That was the Puritans' belief in predestination. Okay. The Puritans were Calvinists. And what that means is they were...
It's a Calvin and Hobbesonists?
Yes, exactly. Okay. They were followers of a reformer his name was John Calvin. Right. And he wrote a several volume book called The Institutes of the Christian Religion. And in it, he talked about predestination. Okay. And what that means is he preached that God, being all omnipotent and all knowing and everything, he therefore knows everything before it even happens. Thousands of years before it happens, he knows everything. So when you are born, he already knows every decision you're going to make. He knows everything you're going to do. And therefore, he already knows if you're going to go to heaven or hell. Okay. And those who make it into heaven, Calvin called these people the elect. And the Puritans were constantly looking for signs that they were members of the elect. There was zero way a person could know if they were members of the elect or not. There was no way you could know if, you had made it into heaven or not. There was zero way to do that. But the Puritans constantly looked for signs anyway. And one of the ways that they did that, was they constantly went to church. They were pious. They strived for this pious lifestyle because maybe by doing that, this is what would get you into heaven. It's not going to be the amount of good things that you do. It's going to be being pious, doing everything that the minister tells you to do, and being a good Christian in general. Okay. Which, being a good Christian, if you were seeking out witches and destroying them, I guess that would look good in God's eyes, wouldn't it? If you are accused of witchcraft, if you're Catherine Harris and you're walking around with an accusation of witchcraft, if you're Bridget Bishop and you're walking around with an accusation of witchcraft, chances are you're not a member of the elect. No. Okay. Oh, I had hope. And this is how the rest of the society would see it. You're obviously not one of God's chosen. You may as well just go lay with your demons and have your demon sex because you're all horny for it anyway. What you could do was you could go to church every Sunday. You could do everything that the minister tells you to do. You could pray all the time. You could fast. They really had no way of knowing what actually pleased God and what didn't. Catherine Harris can do all those things as much as she liked. Nobody was going to think that she was among the elect. Right. That accusation was going to follow her around, and it was going to haunt her the rest of her life. And I'm sure it did. Bridget Bishop was another. We'll get into her later. We'll get into her later on. Yeah. She also had a big strike against her because she had been accused of witchcraft before and was one of the few that had been accused and put on trial for witchcraft and survived. Okay. And found not guilty, and then she was accused again. She can't buy a break. And like I said, moving didn't always do the trick. These accusations would follow you. And I only mention her because she was, like Catherine Harris, she'd been accused of witchcraft before. She'd been accused of witchcraft and been acquitted. And that's kind of rare, Everyone in New England knew that word being used against them had serious consequences. I mean, it could very well mean your life. It certainly will mean your credibility, your reputation. You're going to lose all your friends. No one's going to want to have anything to do with you. And you're probably going to have to move. if you survive at all.
Right.
And it's not just you. I mean, an accusation of witchcraft could mean your family's reputation as well. Your spouse, your children, your siblings, your friends, and anyone else, anyone that defended you, anyone that vouched for you, that came to your aid. Vouching for someone who'd been accused of witchcraft was really risky because obviously you're sympathetic to witchcraft. Are you a witch too? You guys are awfully friendly.
I don't have to have a 78-point IQ to figure that one out.
Because of stuff like that, it deterred people from vouching when they knew they were being falsely accused of witchcraft. This was certainly true in Salem, except with the case of Rebecca Nurse. When she was accused, there was a petition that people signed, attesting to her innocence. She was the only one accused that the people started a petition over,
Wow. How many signatures did she get?
I don't know. But even that didn't save her. In 1648, Margaret Jones went on trial for witchcraft.
Ah, Mrs. Jones. We've heard about her. She lays with the devil.
She was a midwife. She lived in Boston. She was really interested in herbal medicines and things like that.
Okay.
She and her husband both were accused of witchcraft. They were accused of fortune telling and sorcery and things like that. And Jones supposedly could tell the future.
Hey, but wouldn't God be the ultimate fortune teller? Because he already knows.
She was prophesizing the future. And so she was accused of witchcraft, and because of this, she was executed in 1648. They also stripped her down, went looking for the witch's teat, and found one.
Gotta find it. Oh, look right there. It's a wart. No, it's not. It's a teat.
Then in 1688, again in Boston, Anne Glover was convicted of witchcraft and executed. She was convicted after 4 children that were in her care became ill. She was accused, of course, of using witchcraft to make them ill, because that's what witches do. They like to kill children.
Yeah. Why not? They're the easiest, right?
But when she's not having sex with demons, she's trying to kill these kids. She supposedly had the witch's mark. And supposedly Glover was actually Catholic. The Puritans had no tolerance for other people.
Okay.
If you wanted to live with the Puritans, you needed to be Puritan, and they absolutely expected you to adopt their way of life. What sense would it make for them to go over there and build the society that they think other people are going to adopt if they don't make you yourself adopt it if you move there? They wanted everybody who lived there to be Puritan, and so they had really no tolerance for other groups.
That's
the
right.
Quakers, nope, screw them.
Nope.
And the Catholics, yep, screw them too.
Yep. Are you a Puritan? No. Be gone.
And Anne Glover was rumored to having been a secret Catholic, and she was accused of having puppets. Puppets were dolls that they thought witches put pins in and would hurt
like
people through like a voodoo doll, through some supernatural means. And they found puppets in her possession, which more than likely were not these dolls that, using them for this purpose, but were probably, it was thought they might have been dolls that represented Catholic saints.
Okay. This is St. Christopher. Can't you tell? Look at this likeness.
Anne Hibbins was another woman who was hanged in Boston. She was killed in 1656. She was actually the 3rd person in Boston to be hung for witchcraft. She's actually a character in Nathaniel Hawthorne's The Scarlet Letter.
Ooh, okay.
While The Scarlet Letter is a fictitious story set in a very real time in a very real society, Hester Prynne is fictitious, but her friend, Anne Hibbins, was not. She was a real person, and in the story of The Scarlet Letter, she befriends Hester Prynne on account that both of them are social outcasts. Hibbins, because of her witchcraft accusation and her outspokenness. In real life, Anne Hibbins was outspoken. She was not afraid to get in someone's face and tell them how it was. So when she got into a dispute with a carpenter, she let him have it one day. She let him know what she thought about him. Okay. And he did not appreciate that.
Nope.
At all. And what do? Well, he accused her of witchcraft.
You complain about it on Yelp.
He complained about her to the magistrates, about her behavior. She insulted him. She was abrasive. She was aggressive. How dare she?
She's obviously a witch.
He went to the magistrate and complained about Ann Hibbins. So there was an inquiry. She was brought in for questioning, and there was an inquiry into her behavior, into whether or not, she was a witch, and and maybe that's why she was behaving this way. And of course, long story short, they excommunicated her, charged her for witchcraft. Well, they ordered her to apologize, which she wouldn't do.
You take your Yelp review back.
And she was like, no. Okay, we'll just send you to the noose. Essentially, that's really what she was hung over, was she insulted this carpenter, his feelings were hurt, and she refused to apologize for it.
Wow. She wanted a nightstand, clearly a nightstand, and what she got was an end table.
Right. And he clearly didn't know what was up. He should have paid more attention to her directions,
Right. But yep. It cost her life.
Witch hunts and witch trials, anyway, provided, and certainly this was true in Salem, they provided an opportunity for people to get rid of imagined or real enemies, or maybe you just want their land.
Okay.
Maybe you've been eyeballing their property for a while.
You're saying if I accuse my neighbor of being a witch, they go to court, they're guilty, they get hung, I get their land?
Not necessarily.
Or do I have to buy the land because nobody owns it anymore because I've killed them off?
You'll have to buy it. Their land would be forfeit. It would be auctioned off. You then have an opportunity to acquire their land.
Okay.
Maybe you might be the only one that can afford it. Mm-hmm. And maybe you know that.
So what about the rest of the person's family? If John Holmes over there, I got him accused and sentenced to death, but, the rest of his family, what do I do about them? Accuse them all of being witches? Get rid of all of them? Okay.
Yeah, a witchcraft trial could very well mean losing all of your possessions. It could mean losing your home, your land, everything.
Wow.
And your children get nothing.
You get nothing. You lose. Good day, sir.
That may have not always been the case, but that was usually what happened in England. If you were executed for heresy or, something like that, your land, everything was forfeit and was reclaimed by the church. So, wow. And your family got nothing.
Nothing.
Tra-la-la. So, a witch accusation, it wasn't just my reputation is going to be scarred forever, or I'm going to lose all of my friends and I'm going to be a social pariah. I'm going to have to move somewhere else. It wasn't just about that. It was, holy shit, they may take away my children's inheritance entirely. Yeah. Witchcraft accusations destroyed people's lives. That's what they did. Yep. And that's why they were used. You might be able to get somebody's land. You might be able to get back at somebody simply because you don't like them. And I'm sure there were people who were accused and their accuser legit believed that they were a witch.
Wow.
Martin Luther, the German reformer who started the Protestant Reformation, his mother wholeheartedly believed that their neighbor was a witch. He was a sickly child when he was growing up, and his mother believed that he was bewitched by the woman next door, that she was the one doing it, Okay. And because of this, he believed it. He grew up believing that she was a witch and she was the one afflicting him. So it's not to say that every single person who was accused of witchcraft was accused because there was somebody eyeballing their land or they'd pissed somebody off and they wanted to get back at them. It could be because someone actually believed that they were a witch. But at the same time, it's very obvious, certainly with Salem, that there was an opportunity there and people went for it. And they took full advantage of those trials, of the hysteria that was going on in Salem. Cotton Mather was a Puritan minister. He wrote several things, he has a plethora of works. One of them was published in 1689. It was called Memorable Providences. He had the year before been privy to Anne Glover's trial.
Okay.
He had witnessed the children, the 4 children that she had supposedly afflicted. And he was observant to all of this, and he wrote a book about it, and that's what Memorable Providences is about.
Ooh.
In that book, he claimed that witches had the power to attack other people through their specter.
Okay.
So in other words, I don't physically have to come over there and harm you.
Nope.
I can send my specter, and my specter can do it, and no one else can see my specter hurting you except you. So you'll just look like a crazy person because they won't see anything.
That's right.
With this, what this is called is spectral evidence.
Ooh,
It's not
I like that.
actually real evidence of witchcraft.
No, it's spectral.
It's my word against yours, and I can say whatever I want, and either you believe me or you don't. That's really all it is, because you can't prove or disprove spectral evidence, and because we can't see it. And because of this, Mather did say, he did warn against using spectral evidence in trials.
Okay.
Because it is your word against mine. Therefore, in a witchcraft trial, how do you prove somebody's a witch? Well, you need evidence. It is going to have to be something besides spectral, because spectral is not legit evidence. Now, a person's testimony, that's legit. You know, seeing what you think is evidence of afflictions, that's evidence. What you think is a witch's teat,
that's evidence. Oh.
and you need more than one
Teat?
accuser, usually. Like it was going to take more than one person to say, yes, her behavior is very strange. These things she's doing is very weird. You know, she has a witch's teat. Demons suck from it, or whatever, you know. And that was usually what it would take, was better, for lack of a better term, better evidence than spectral. And Cotton Mather, to his defense, I guess, to his credibility, he did warn against using spectral evidence in trials.
Well, you're the one that brought it up.
However, even though he warned against that, spectral evidence was allowed. Even though it shouldn't be, even though it wasn't supposed to be, even though in other trials, in other witch trials, it hadn't been allowed. In Salem, it was. And Mather was very supportive of the witch trials in Salem. He was all about them, and he wrote about them, and he was very vocal about them. And I find it strange that he was okay with that, knowing that spectral evidence was being allowed. But this is one reason why the hysteria was allowed to be a hysteria, because you have these ministers like Cotton Mather who vigorously preach about witches and witchcraft and their danger on society and their danger to God's people. You know, that's why these witch hunts were allowed to happen. That's why they did happen.
And it escalated quite quickly.
So Mather, like I said, he was extremely vocal about witches and witchcraft in his sermons, and he preached about them all the time. He wrote about them, he preached about them, he talked about them, and he was not the only one. He wasn't the only Puritan minister in the colony doing this. Mather was behind the appointing of a guy named William Stoughton as a lieutenant governor to William Phibbs. William Phibbs was at the time in 1691, 92, he was the governor of Massachusetts, and Mather was greatly supportive of William Stoughton as his lieutenant governor. Stoughton was not a very popular guy politically.
No?
No. But strangely, Stoughton, Massachusetts is named after him.
Ah.
Stoughton shared Mather's views on witchcraft. He was every bit as passionate about this subject as Cotton Mather was. And actually, in 1692, right before these trials broke out, Massachusetts Bay lost their charter.
Okay.
Their charter was revoked. And what that charter did was they could no longer govern themselves. And with that being said, legally, they can't have any trials. They can't legally prosecute anybody. So these trials wouldn't actually be able to carry on, without that charter. Stoughton went with William Phibbs to England to go to try to get that charter back. And they did. They were successful. So everything was kind of put on hold until they got back with that charter, because legally nobody can do anything.
Hang tight,
it.
guys. I'll be right back.
Right. I'm just going to run over across the Atlantic. I'll be back. Yeah. So it was William Phibbs, William Stoughton, and Increase Mather. Increase Mather was Cotton Mather's dad. The three of them went to England to get that charter. When they get back to Massachusetts, there is something weird going on. Everybody's talking about witches.
No.
They talk about witches in their sermons.
Oh.
Yes, we preach against witches and we've learned about them, so we can try to avoid them. But they get back to Massachusetts and it's like people everywhere. There's a whole bunch of people in Salem that they're hearing about that are being accused of witchcraft.
Oh, great.
This hysteria seems to be originating in Salem. Everybody in the colony is talking about it, but something scary is going on in Salem.
Something's very, very wrong here.
There's accusations apparently flying everywhere in Salem, and so numerous people at this point have already been questioned and arrested. They just can't actually try any of them because they don't have that charter. But Governor Phibbs, of course, it's his job. I mean, he's responsible for the colony. It's his job to do something about this. So they're all looking at him like, I mean, what are you going to do about this? And Phibbs is like, well, okay, I'm too busy to go there and deal with this myself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put Stoughton in charge of a tribunal. And this tribunal will go to Salem and find out just what the hell is going on over there.
Okay. I'm sure we can trust this guy to get to the bottom of it, and there's not going to be any problems whatsoever, right?
This was in March 1692, actually, when Phibbs put this tribunal together. He called it the Court of Oyer and Terminer. It means to hear and to determine. William Stoughton, he was in charge of it. Jonathan Corwin, he was a magistrate in Salem. He was, of course, on the Court of Oyer and Terminer. There were 9 of them, 9 judges, 9 magistrates in total. 5 of them went to Harvard. I mean, they all served on the governor's council. They trained as ministers, though none of them were actually ministers. And their job is to go to Salem, and they are to question the afflicted. Okay. And they are to question the perpetrators and find out if there is evidence, weighty, whatever you want to call it, evidence that there is witchcraft going on in Salem and that they need to go ahead and have a trial.
Okay.
Essentially, their job is to just go over there, find out what exactly is going on, if there's any truth to these accusations, how bad these accusations are, and if this is a case that needs to go any further. I actually got Court of Oyer and Terminer mixed up. That is a French phrase that means to hear and to determine. The Malleus Maleficorum is Latin.
Oh, wow. Oh, I could see how you get that mixed up. I mean, jeez. All the time.
That is Latin for the hammer of the witch. Court of Oyer and Terminer was a French phrase for to hear and to determine. So there were 9 magistrates, and like I said, their job was to go over there and see if there was any witches in Salem and if they needed to go ahead and have a trial. We can't take this lightly because, this is a witchcraft accusation. They all know how serious that is. They all know what an accusation does to a person, and they all know what happens to a person who's convicted, or they very well may go to the noose.
I have faith in these guys. They're going to get to the bottom of it. It's going to be all good. Everything's going to go back to normal.
They're going to clear it right up for us.
No problem.
And everything.
Just give me a week.
No problem whatsoever. There actually was one sane dude on the Court of Oyer and Terminer, but I will save that for next week.
Okay. Well, all right. Well, let's wrap this up for this week. Now, that is some heavy shit. I've learned a lot. There's a lot of names here involved, and I am not going to remember any of them, so I can't wait till next week when you remind me of all of these people involved. But until then, hey guys, go on over to themoratorium.com and check out everything we have to offer. Hey, go on over to our Patreon and help support this podcast. We need your help. Tell us, guys, if you enjoy listening to these true crime accounts.
What happened in Salem was 100% a crime. Absolutely. Yeah. And we will go into that certainly in the next episode.
Definitely. All right, guys, please go on over to our social media. You can check us out on Facebook, our Facebook group, still posting every day. We're on Twitter, Instagram. Anyway, guys, go on over to our TikTok and check out the videos that I throw up every week. We're having lots of fun with all of this. I hope you're enjoying it. Please drop us a line. We want to hear from you. Let us know what we did right. Let us know what we did wrong. We want to hear it either way. Go on over to moviemoratorium@gmail.com and let us know. All right, guys, but for this week, we're going to shut this bitch down. Krista, do you have anything else to offer?
Don't have any sex with demons. And make sure to check your genitals for the witch's teeth.
Look for teats. They could be anywhere.
But probably in your genitals.
Probably. I'm going to be searching my genitals extensively later.
Ladies, try to contain yourself. Try to contain those sexual urges. All right. I know that you have a weak memory. All right. And that's hard for you. You're going to forget what I said right afterwards. But
what?
No sex with demons.
No sex. I heard sex with demons. Okay.
Sex with demons.
Sex with demons. All right, guys. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
You've been listening to a special edition of The Moratorium, an MT Cornfield production. Join us next week as Krista and I suckle once again on the teat with the Salem Witch Trials Part 2. If you have any movie suggestions, or just want to tell us how much we really suck, you can contact us at moviemoratorium@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, and long live VHS.